Hello and welcome to Helicopter Train Videos. In this video we're looking at general tips and tricks for instructors to block and avoid dangerous student errors. This is a clip from the Helicopter Training Podcast Dangerous Student Errors series. You can find those full episodes linked in the description or in our YouTube podcast tab.
Well, I guess one of the first things all flight instructors need to learn about is guarding the controls. Tell us about that. What should they know?
Yeah, so there's what I call resting CFI pose, which is it's a very rare state for an instructor to be, and that's where they're going to have their right hand on their knee, their left hand is going to be down on the collective, just sensing what's going on with the throttle and making sure there's no big movements, and maybe their feet away from the pedals on the floor. That's a very rare state to be with a brand new student, especially. In fact, probably never there.
And so, I'm guessing that's only when you're at high altitude and probably
away from the ground. Yeah. And that depends on the student you're working with, the conditions. There's so many sort of variables about when you'd be moving away from that resting position and into more of an active guarding position. And so some of the general considerations are the student, what their experience level is. Are they new to you? That should obviously increase your guard a little bit. What are the conditions? Is it windy? Is it gusty? Is there rain? Even rain will affect your depth perception. Is it high density altitude? With the high DA, the aircraft doesn't perform so well. The rotor RPM moves much faster. Are you close to a nice flat surface, or are you operating off airport where you're more likely to hit something and get a dynamic rollover? How busy is the traffic? Are you getting consumed with all this traffic talk, and your situational awareness is being degraded a little bit? So, and then of course your own personal experience level and fatigue. I think that's a really important thing to remember. You don't have the same calm level when you shouldn't. When you're fatigued, you should realize you're going to take a little bit longer to respond and kind of build the extra buffer in. And then it goes into the specifics of what is the maneuver we're working on, and that's something we'll talk about in a minute. And it's also, I think, with the sort of going back to the general guarding, you have to remember that an instructor who's constantly got their hand right around that cyclic, you're obviously safe because you're basically flying the aircraft, but that's not what we need for a student to be able to feel what the aircraft's doing, to fly the aircraft. So you have to kind of find that balance. We can talk for, if you want, real quickly about some of the general considerations of each control.
Yes, please.
So I think let's start with the pedals. I would say in certain maneuvers, you should certainly have both feet close to the pedals. And that would be a general good starting position for a lot of the hover work. And we'll cover some of the more specific stuff. Once you are up at altitude, again, we talked about it may be safe to bring your feet away. That's usually a relatively low risk maneuver, forward flight, as far as the pedals go. Students are very rarely going to be stomping pedals when you're in forward flight. And if they do, it's a relatively low risk for them to do that. I would also say, going back to the hover work though, even as you become more relaxed with the student, their level progresses and you've got reasonable level of experience with them. When I slow down, when I come close to sort of hover speeds, it doesn't matter who I'm flying with, I'll be bringing my left foot up close over the pedal. And we're talking about Robinson product here with the counter rotating. It would obviously be opposite for Cabri, rotating the other way. Because what I don't want to happen is for the aircraft to start powering up, the torque reaction starting to kick in, and the student getting late on that left pedal to stop that right yaw. So I always, as we slow down, start to bring my left foot up. And then during hovering, if it's hover training, I'm usually with both feet. But so then there are also times where we want to do what's called a right brace, a right leg brace, where we're holding the right foot and locking our leg so that if the student who is supposed to push their right pedal in certain maneuvers, hover autos, auto entries, if they do try to push the left pedal, they're going to push the left pedal in, the right pedal moves up and hits our foot, and we block that movement. We also sense that feeling and can immediately use that as a trigger to push through onto the right to stop. It's probably going to be a yaw, an unwanted yaw. Again, we'll get into the specifics when we get to those maneuvers. Let's move on to the collective, though. I think with the collective, so our left hand as an instructor should really live down there on the collective, a very loose. I just have my thumb on the side of the chair, and I just have my hand kind of draped over the throttle and the collective. And so we're generally, if we're not talking about any particular maneuver that we're blocking against, we should just be feeling that the collective's going up and down in the direction that we expect it to go and when we expect it to go. And then when we get to the throttle, there's a little bit more going on with the throttle. We always want to be, as a pilot, we should be monitoring a throttle of something like an R22 or an R44. The governor assists the pilot, but the pilot has to be following along to know what's going on and be ready to override it. Governors fail, they go high-low, they go erratic. So we always have a hand there. But as the instructor, we need to be quite close on that throttle. And I call this like 3 or 4 ways we can do that generally. The first is a very loose grip. We're holding thumb and 2 fingers, and we're just letting that throttle move under our hand. And that's normal for a pilot or a student should have that kind of monitoring grip. The next level up, I would say, is when actually I have a throttle grip here for those of you who are watching. I actually have a throttle grip that came off a helicopter today, so I grabbed it. Let me have a full hand grip on the throttle and a loose grip still. So we're still letting the throttle move. And at this point, we're being a little bit more proactive about being ready to overgrip the throttle. But the problem with this grip, or lack of grip, this kind of loose grip over it, is if the student does make a big movement on the throttle and you clamp down, the time it takes for your skin to take that looseness out of your skin and create that friction, it can already be a little bit too late for an overspeed or an underspeed event. So there's limited use on that grip technique. The next level is what I call a strong grip, or you might hear a death grip. Right? And a death grip is a bad thing for a student to do. We can talk about that later. But for an instructor, a strong grip means that you have your hand already gripped around the throttle, but you must have a loose wrist. And that way the throttle can still move as it's supposed to, either through the governor action or the student doing whatever they're supposed to be doing. But you've already taken out all the slop in your grip, so that the moment that the student goes too far or the wrong way or throttle chops you or whatever it is, what you do is you just lock your wrist, and it makes a much quicker, faster way to hold that throttle tight and take control of the throttle, as opposed to loosely holding over the throttle and letting it run underneath your hand. And then the last kind of throttle grip technique that we talk about is an underhand grip, or sometimes called a fingernails up grip, where you already have your hand twisted around the throttle so that it can only roll one way, which would be typically rolling the throttle off for an auto entry or a hover auto. So those are the 4 levels of grip for an instructor on the throttle. And then the last control being the cyclic. I also have kind of a color system of progression of cyclic guarding, I suppose. At the very bottom level is we're not guarding at all. We have our right hand on our thigh, and that's okay in certain situations, of course. But when we need to start paying attention to the cyclic and guarding, I have a color code system of green, yellow, and red. And green would be bringing your hand up and having it just open but close to the cyclic. So it won't take much for you to take the control, and it won't take much for you to block in most directions. And we'll cover in certain maneuvers where that might be the right grip, or the right block, I should say. The next level up I call a yellow level of cyclic blocking, and that's where you actually you kind of have a closed grip around the cyclic, but you're not holding the cyclic. A pen might be a better example because it's not as thick. So you can see it would still allow the cyclic to move, but within pretty defined boundaries. So the student shouldn't feel you on the controls, but you're there to be able to block. As you know, the cyclic is extremely sensitive. We're talking pressure more than movement for many maneuvers. So it's a pretty generous amount of movement still. The next level would be, I'd call it the red level of cyclic, and that's really where you are all the way around. When you get to that point, you really need to communicate to the student that they are still flying, and you're helping them, you're nudging or you're guarding. So they need to understand this is not the time for them to let go of the control, because that's not what you're doing here. You're just being close enough that you can make instantaneous, adjustments. Hover training typically would be kind of, initial hover training. Might be doing that kind of work with a cyclic with them. And then there's a couple of like modified versions of the sort of more yellow grip, where you might have what I call a U-shaped grip, where you may have your hand close to the back of the cyclic but open at the front. And so we know the risk in certain maneuvers is that they're going to come too quickly back on the cyclic, and we're just blocking close on the backside and relatively loose on the either side. And we can also do something similar where we put our hand in a U shape but covering the front and back. We're just making sure that would be forward flight, for example. A brand new student, they're given the cyclic, you've explained over and over how sensitive it is, and you give the controls, and almost immediately they're going to start diving the nose back and forth. And you want to be nice and close to help them help guide them through that. But so those are the generic, what I call the general blocking and guarding of controls.
Now, you use a phrase called ghosting the maneuver. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so this is another sort of generic technique where certain maneuvers where if the student's doing something, you have time to look at what they're doing, work out what they're doing, tell them what they need to do differently. They hear it, they process it, and hopefully they do the right thing. And if they don't, you still have time to fix. And there's certain maneuvers where that is not all at all possible, where we're talking about very time sensitive, low safety tolerance for mistakes, certain maneuvers like hover autos, auto entries, recovery from the vortex ring state with a lateral recovery, quick stop slopes, where the instructor needs to be thinking about how they are actually doing the maneuver themselves. And I don't mean doing the maneuver. I don't mean them actually doing it physically and pushing the controls, but being in their mind, sitting up straight. This is how I would do this maneuver as it happens. So the moment there's a deviation, they don't have to process what just happened. They just know that's not how I would do it. And they can take the controls and continue the maneuver as it should be. Robinson have a lot of great safety analysis, but one they have, it's safety analysis 27, is talking about surprise throttle chops, for example. And they have some good little bits of advice in there. But one of the things that they say is never wait to see what the student does, and always assume that you will be the one completing that entry into the auto. And that's the kind of the mindset you have to be in. And it takes a few, we do it with the instructors, and we do a couple of pretty scary student errors, and they miss them. And they say, I don't even know what just happened there. And I said, well, that's my point of ghosting, is don't think about what just happened. Just understand it's gone beyond what you would have done. Too much, too little, wrong direction, whatever it is. Guard, block, mind controls if necessary. And that's generally a good thing, I'd say. If someone does something that's completely opposite, or the wrong maneuver entry, or whatever it is, probably best just go straight to my controls. Because even if you manage to corral them back into, maybe it was an auto entry where they throttle chopped you on entry or something like that, their mind's now thinking, what did I just do? What did I just do? Instead of flying the maneuver, right? So I think when we get a lot of these misfires, or I call them brain farts, where a student is in a stressful situation of a maneuver that maybe they're a little bit scared of, or is new to them, and their brain reaches out and grabs something, the wrong thing, and does it. And we just take the controls. Take the controls, give them a breather. Let's talk about, what are we doing here? What is the maneuver? What should we do? I mean, I've done plenty of times in the aircraft as well as in the sim where I'll do an error, and the instructor uses this technique, and my controls, they take the controls, and I say, what did the student do wrong there? I don't know. I said, good, because the focus is taking the controls, not trying to process what just happened. You had the right priority there. This is what I actually did. And they're like, oh, wow, I see that now. But yeah.
So back in episode 118, which was just a couple of weeks ago, we had Richard Mornington Sanford on, and he talked about a story with a student who froze up on the controls, and you contacted me and said that that really resonated with you. Talk about freezing up on the controls and what you teach CFIs about that.
Yeah. Locking up on the controls or freezing on the controls. It's it happens. I wouldn't say it's like a lot of these errors aren't what I would call common errors that you find in the helicopter flying handbook or the ACS under common errors. These are the uncommon errors, but they are the dangerous errors, especially if a student locks up, say, on the end of an auto rotation in the flare, or entry or recovery of a vortex ring state, that kind of stuff. So we do a couple of things. We do student locking up in the sim to kind of get them into it, and then we do a couple in the aircraft as well with certain maneuvers. And what we teach the instructor is they're typically sat in the left-hand seat, and they have the add-on on the cyclic for the instructor controls, which actually is, if you look at it, as a slightly longer bar. So you have more leverage from the left side on the T-bar than on the other side. And you can use that leverage. You can put your hand on top of the cyclic bar and you can pull it down using the pivot point of the T-bar. And you have to be careful, and that's why we do it in training, to make sure you don't push it forward or push it back. Just come straight down using that pivot point to pull the cyclic out of the student's hand, or at least wake them up as you're elbowing them at the same time and shouting "my controls." I know there's been a few accidents that have been attributed to this, and I think it's a fun part of the training, because they're laughing a little bit, that we're role playing a little bit. I'm playing this student that's not letting go, and they feel a little bit awkward shouting at me and elbowing me, and I'm like, please do it. Do it now, so you're prepared for when it happens, if it happens. Yeah.
And my control. Takes a little bit getting used to it. It does, yeah. Back to me.
Yeah, and we talked about auditory exclusion, which is when people are feeling stress and they literally can't hear. And so you need to do other things like touch them, elbow them, cover their eyes, do something just to kind of break them out of that, that deer in the headlights look that they have and that grip on the controls.
This clip was just a small taste of the 3-part Dangerous Student Errors series on the Helicopter Training podcast. In that series, we break down key instructor techniques like guarding and blocking controls, ghosting maneuvers, when to take the controls, and how to respond when a student freezes up. We then apply those concepts across real training scenarios, including slopes, hover work, running landings, quick stops, vortex ring state, auto rotations, simulated engine failures, off-airport operations, and more. We also review real maneuver-specific accidents and what we can learn from them as instructors and as students. You can find the full episodes right here on this YouTube channel under the podcast tab, or search for Helicopter Training Podcast on your favorite podcast player. And if you're interested in learning to fly helicopters, you can start learning right now on Helicopter Training Video's YouTube channel, with video playlists covering things like ground school subjects, flight maneuvers, as well as following along with a student on every training flight from day one all the way through to check ride. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to get all the latest videos and help support this channel. And finally, for more information, including articles, quizzes, and resources, and how to support this volunteer project, please check out our website, helicoptertrainingvideos.com. Thanks for watching. Fly safe.